ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons. Hey, this is Arlene and you're listening to Duran ASEAN. At our third segment today on our ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, we have a guest all the way in Thailand. Her name is Debbie Stothard, and she'll be sharing with us on the plight of the Rohingya people. This is in conjunction with the recent ASEAN summit and the speech of President Barack Obama relating to the plight of these people. So welcome to the studio. Thanks for connecting with us.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. How are you?
Really busy. So there's been quite a few developments in Burma or Myanmar in the past few weeks, and it's all action on all stations at this point.
When it comes to the recent development on the Rohingya issue, how was the situation during the ASEAN summit itself in terms of the issue being highlighted at that level?
President Joko Widodo actually raised this issue in public, but the voice of ASEAN on the protection of the Rohingya, who are continuing to face a very serious pre-genocidal situation, the voice of ASEAN has been very, very muted, especially when you compare it to what President Barack Obama said during his recent visit to Burma as well. It looks like President Obama seems to be more concerned about the Rohingya than ASEAN.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that the issue of Rohingya has not been widely debated or even raised among ASEAN leaders. Why do you think this is happening?
I think this year we saw a very big step downwards, mainly because Burma was chairing ASEAN. During the first big ASEAN meeting in January this year, the host in Naypyidaw, the capital of Burma, actually gagged ASEAN ministers from talking about the Rohingya issue and talking about a range of other politically sensitive issues in the region. So we've never had a situation where ASEAN leaders were deliberately and obviously censored by the host, by the current chair of ASEAN. And we've seen also a lot of pushback and a lot of nagging and harassment by the Burmese authorities, going so far as to instruct officials to walk out of the room during meetings if the word Rohingya was even mentioned. Mm-hmm. International humanitarian agencies, UN agencies have been bullied into avoiding the use of the word Rohingya.
So they are not allowed to even mention the word Rohingya.
This boils down to the fact that the Burmese authorities do not want the Rohingya to even have an identity.
Mm-hmm. But so what is the contentious word of Rohingya that would implicate the whole of Burma if it is being included as part of the ethnic group?
Well, historically, since independence in the 1950s, the Burmese authorities have mixed up ethnic identity with indigenous rights. So to have a nationally recognized ethnic identity implies that you have indigenous rights to land and so on, which is a little bit strange nowadays because everybody is having their land grabbed from under them in Burma, and that land is being used by cronies and the former generals and the government agencies to make money for commercial purposes. So, but going back to the history, there was a list of officially recognized what they call national races, which you would consider ethnic groups. And by the Rohingya wanting to have an ethnic identity as a Rohingya implies that they are demanding certain rights such as citizenship and rights to land. And that created a very terrible knee-jerk reaction because as far as the authorities are concerned, the Rohingya are actually illegal Bengali aliens.
I see.
When and this boils down to this very fundamental lack of recognition of people's human rights, because the Rohingya were recognized prior to 1982 as an ethnic group. They were recognized and they had citizenship, and they had their citizenship taken away from them under the 1982 citizenship law. So these people have become illegal in their own country. So when we talk about the word Rohingya, we are basically acknowledging that this is a distinct community that have a right to an identity, and that it goes against the pre-genocidal framework of the Burmese regime and the extremist movement in Burma, who basically say these people are illegal aliens, they do not have an identity, there's no such thing as Rohingya, and that somehow implies that it's okay to wipe them out.
Were there any, besides Joko Widodo, were there any ASEAN leaders that at least raised the issue, even though they might not push for any changes?
I think some of the Rohingya situation would have been raised informally and discreetly, but many ASEAN leaders were kind of bullied into not even mentioning the word Rohingya in public. And we also see a situation, and this is also ASEAN's fault, because about 8 years ago, when the crisis of Rohingya boat people became so big and became such a regional scandal, ASEAN agreed not to call them Rohingya. First, ASEAN called them Rohingya, and then the Burmese military authorities said there's no such thing as Rohingya. So then they called them Burmese Muslims, and then the Burmese military authorities demanded that they not be even called Burmese. They said they are not Burmese. So in the end, ASEAN actually referred to the Rohingya as people of the Indian Ocean. And they agreed to refer the crisis of Rohingya boat people to the Bali process, which was actually a process dealing with human trafficking.
I see, interesting.
They refused to acknowledge the fact, or they were too scared, or they were too wimpy to acknowledge the fact that Rohingyas in Burma were facing extreme situations of extreme discrimination and were fleeing, and they were essentially refugees, not migrants and not trafficked people.
It's interesting that you use the word wimpy to refer to the ASEAN leaders, because Myanmar is not even the key player in driving ASEAN. It is countries like Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and the Philippines, as well as Thailand, that are the key countries that shape what ASEAN is all about today. So why ASEAN do not have the guts to stand against Myanmar? What is the real reason?
There's several reasons. One is the political culture and the organizational culture of ASEAN, which is to go down to the lowest common denominator, not to rock the boat, to build consensus. And it's really hard to build consensus around genocide when one side is perpetuating the conditions of a pre-genocidal condition, and the other sides are suffering from those consequences. How do you build a consensus around that? So ASEAN itself does not want to take a principled stand on human rights, and it has consistently refused to take, in its history, a principled stand on human rights, firstly. Secondly, ASEAN is hoping that the problem will solve itself and go away, because they don't want to have to grapple with the reality that Rohingya boat people are indeed victims of a pre-settled genocidal situation and are asylum seekers fleeing very harsh conditions, because then it means that ASEAN countries cannot simply push back the Rohingya boat people, because we have an ongoing problem where Rohingya boat people are towed out to sea, and with their diesel, their petrol supplies taken away from them, and they're left to adrift in the ocean. There are many people who have died at sea that way. Last year, Singapore refused to allow a boat carrying last year, a Vietnamese boat passing through the Straits of Malacca found Rohingya people almost drowning because their vessel was breaking up. So they rescued these people and then went to the next port of call, which was Singapore, and Singapore refused to let this Vietnamese ship dock at Singapore because they didn't want to take responsibility for these Rohingya boat people. So we have this very horrible situation where, number one, ASEAN has traditionally been wimpy on human rights issues. Number two, ASEAN doesn't want to take responsibility for the Rohingyas. And number three, they are willing to compromise in whatever way needed in order to keep Burma happy.
But why? Why they need to keep Burma happy?
I think that's also there are also economic issues for consideration, because Singapore is one of the key investors in Burma. So is Thailand, and now Malaysia is also interested in having its own stake. And then there are other countries like Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam who also have very horrible human rights records. And of course, they want to make sure that the human rights standards in ASEAN are quite low, so that they are not criticized. Mm-hmm. So this is in a way, it's a de facto conspiracy to ensure that the Rohingya continue to suffer and continue to be denied their rights, because ASEAN is not just being wimpy. In some situations, it's being downright negligent when it comes to the Rohingya.
Has the Human Rights Charter of ASEAN been effective at all?
Well, when the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration came out, there was a huge amount of criticism because there was no public consultation or discussion on the content of the charter. It was simply a charter drafted for governments and adopted by the governments of ASEAN. Now, within the charter, it was criticized also not just because of the process of drafting was flawed. It was also criticized because the content actually went against key international human rights principles.
For example?
So there were quite a few, but the main point was that many ASEAN many ASEAN leaders promoted the fact that the highlight of the ASEAN Declaration for Human Rights was actually the respect and tolerance for religion. Mm-hmm. And since then, we've actually seen a huge downturn, and that we've seen a rise in religious intolerance, not just in Burma, but in other parts of ASEAN. We've seen now the persecution of the Rohingya has transformed into a nationwide anti-Muslim campaign, where the parliament has already started moving ahead on a package of 4 laws that directly discriminate against Muslims and that will have very serious impacts on people from other ethnic and religious communities in the country.
There's such an irony because a lot of the key players within ASEAN are Muslim majority countries. Does this even sit well with them to know that their Muslim brothers and sisters are being prosecuted?
Well, we can see now Malaysia and Indonesia making some noises, but then Malaysia and Indonesia now seem to be operating not as part of ASEAN, but as individual countries of concern who are concerned with the issue. However, Malaysia's approach to asylum seekers from Burma and migrants from Burma has not been satisfactory at all. They have not. Malaysia's domestic treatment of Rohingya and other minorities, other migrant and asylum seeker groups has not been exemplary. The Rohingya children are still excluded from the education system. Rohingya are still arrested and harassed. So we need to actually be able to firstly get Malaysia and Indonesia to be parties to the Convention on the Rights of Refugees and Asylum Seekers and to take some responsibility in this manner. Otherwise, the way they are dealing with the Rohingya issue has only extended to international advocacy rather than matching. They should have a holistic approach to this, not just international advocacy, but also taking a very strong role in ASEAN and making ASEAN accountable and NAPIDO accountable, and also making sure that the Rohingya and other minorities who have been persecuted in Burma, who are in ASEAN, have access to their basic human rights, which includes health and education.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of human rights violation surrounding the Rohingya communities. Let's talk about the Rohingya communities that have fled the country and moved to Malaysia. Just recently, this month, thousands of Rohingya, they went missing in boats that was supposed to en route to Malaysia. You mentioned that Malaysian government did nothing to handle the situation or to at least, cater to the needs of these people. What would be the human cost of countries within Southeast Asia if Rohingya communities continue to fled their own place to countries like Thailand and Malaysia, and none of the governments in these countries are doing anything?
Well, basically, then, if neighboring countries are not helping the Rohingya and making sure that they have fundamental rights to life, fundamental rights to health and education, and other basic human rights, then they are actually helping the NAPIDO, the Burmese regime, commit a genocide against the Rohingya. I think that is, and I know it sounds extreme, but when you analyze the situation, Rohingya who are able to survive the violence in Arakan state are able to survive the extreme and systematic forms of discrimination, and then able to get into a boat, are themselves facing another threat of death because neighboring countries refuse to help them, and in some cases, neighboring countries actually drag them further out to sea and seize their supplies so that they are unable to survive.
Mm-hmm. So far, what Thailand and Malaysia have done in order for them to respond to these boat people?
Well, firstly, they need to be they need to actually acknowledge that these people are refugees and need to treat them accordingly, and that means treating them according to international human rights standards under the Convention on the Rights of Refugees and Asylum Seekers. I think that needs to happen because we are also still facing, even in Kuala Lumpur, just down the road from you, Rohingya children are not even allowed to go to school, and they are going to informal schools set up by volunteers because the Malaysian education system refuses to give access to education to the children of refugees and asylum seekers.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we mistreat the Rohingya and other refugees in this way, we are just perpetuating the extreme injustice that they just fled from their own home countries.
Is it true Malaysia is the largest place for urban refugee in the world because of Malaysian government is unable to resolve the issue of refugees influx from Myanmar?
I wouldn't know that, Arlene. I wouldn't know that. I haven't actually seen updated figures on that. But I think Malaysia has been criticized and censured, or Malaysia has been criticized for its poor ability or lack of effort to combat human trafficking. And I think that the bad treatment of Rohingya and other asylum seekers makes them more vulnerable to human trafficking. So I think if Malaysia really wants to combat human trafficking, it needs to have a humane and systematic response to acknowledge Rohingya and other asylum seekers as refugees and to allow international agencies to provide assistance accordingly.
Mhm. We will take a short break. When we return, more discussion on the Rohingya.
Some days her shape in the doorway will speak to me. A bird's wing on the window. Sometimes I'll hear her when she's sleeping. Her fever dream, a language on her face. I want your flowers like babies. What God's love, or maybe as sure as tomorrow will come. Some days like rain on the doorstep, she'll cover me with grace in all she offers. Sometimes I like just to ask her what honest words she can't afford to say. Like, I want your flowers like babies. Want God's love, or maybe as sure as tomorrow will come.
ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons. Hi, this is Arlene, and we are continuing our discussion with Debbie Stothard. So, Debbie, regarding on the issue of the Rohingya in their own state, in Rakhine State, what is the current development right now?
The big controversy now lies in the Rakhine Action Plan that was promoted in September as a solution to the problems faced by the Rohingya. Firstly, this Rakhine Action Plan involves the verification of identity and citizenship of the Rohingya. Earlier this year, there was a census in which Rohingya were not allowed to identify themselves as Rohingya, and they were pressured to identify themselves as Bengali, meaning they come from Bangladesh and not Burma. So the people who identify themselves as Rohingya will be automatically put in camps as illegal aliens under the Rakhine Action Plan. The people who compromised and call themselves Bengali are being forced to prove with documents that they are indeed the descendants of citizens. And if they can prove they had citizenship for the past 2 or 3 generations, then they can be eligible to obtain naturalized citizenship, which is an extreme and second-class form of citizenship in the country. Those who fail the verification will be put in camps with the people who identified themselves as Rohingya. Now, these people will be kept in camps indefinitely, and there will be pressure to deport them to Bangladesh or as refugees to be resettled by UNHCR in any other part of the world, and the pressure will be to kick them out of Burma. Now, in September, there was an exercise in Meabon Township in Arakan State, Rakhine State, where 3,000 Rohingya applied for citizenship under this new system. Only 200 got citizenship.
I see.
So we're looking at a success rate of about 7%, maybe maximum 10% of the over 1 million Rohingya, the 1.2 million Rohingya in Arakan State will be given citizenship, and close to 1 million Rohingya will be kept in camps as illegal aliens for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Those who are lucky to get citizenship in Rakhine State will then also be permanently segregated from the Buddhist population. So there is a move to permanently segregate the Buddhists from the Muslims.
When you say from the Muslim across, is this goal across all Myanmar Muslim or just the Rohingya Muslim?
No, at the moment it's for Rakhine. The Rakhine Action Plan is for Rakhine states. There's also a move to obtain a huge amount of international aid and support to develop the state so that the Buddhists, and most of the benefits will go to Buddhists. Mm-hmm. At the moment, there are about 140,000 internally displaced persons in Arakan State or Rakhine State, and 138,000 of them are Rohingya.
I see.
So we can see this is a form of apartheid, which is now being spread to other parts of Burma because of the new legislation called the National Race Protection Package. That's a package of 4 laws that specifically discriminate against Muslims and that will eventually discriminate against other ethnic and religious minorities.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting updates about the current situation in Rakhine State. But it's interesting to know that it has never been one of the agenda of the ASEAN summit. Why, when it comes to Myanmar being the host of ASEAN summit, they do not want any of the international and regional partners or representatives to talk about it?
Well, this is Burma dictating the agenda of ASEAN, and this is something that we warned about for many years already, and that was why we were successful in the campaign to prevent Burma from chairing ASEAN in 2006.
But
and
unfortunately, sorry. Yeah.
So now ASEAN has not been able to give an excuse, and they actually gave Burma the chair of ASEAN. And the reality is that if you are chair of ASEAN, you're supposed to make sure that all the key ASEAN meetings go smoothly and come and go productively. But the Burmese authorities, the Burmese regime is treating the ASEAN chair as basically an ASEAN throne, that they're the king of everyone in ASEAN and they can tell ASEAN what to do. I think, it's really embarrassing and ironic that while all of this rituals and photo opportunities and self-congratulations is happening in Naypyidaw, also in Naypyidaw, the lower house of parliament has already adopted part 1 of the National Race Protection Package, which is a law criminalizing interfaith marriage between Buddhists and Muslims.
I see.
So that's awaiting approval by the upper house. And then there's 3 other laws which are being discussed. One is to impose a birth and population control on the Muslim community in the country. We believe this is an extension of the pre-existing policy. In Rakhine State, for example, Rohingya are legally not allowed to have more than 2 children if they are given permission by the authorities to get married, and any children who are born outside of the authorities' permission are not allowed to get birth certificates. So we have about 40 to 60,000 Rohingya children who have been denied birth certificates. So now it looks like they are translating that very extreme restriction onto all Muslims in the country under the Birth and Population Control Bill. The third bill is on to ban polygamy, and I think the 4th bill is to restrict conversion by Buddhists to another religion, mainly to Islam. So we can already see that they are legalizing a kind of apartheid that systematically discriminates against Muslims, but will probably also be applied to other religious minorities in the country.
How much of the people of Burma as a whole receive the kind of treatment the Myanmar government is imposing towards the Rohingya people? Are they in support, or are they against, or are they mixed in terms of their view on this issue?
I think some of the other minorities are very deeply concerned at these developments, because part of the anti-Muslim movement is also motivated by racism against people of South Asian descent. So that means the discrimination against people of Indian descent is partly part of that anti-Muslim movement, and that also means that Hindus in Burma are also feeling the heat, firstly. Secondly, in places like Kachin and northern Shan states, where there's been a very extreme war going on, where the war is now in its 4th year, the local people there see this as some of them are concerned that first Muslims will be targeted, and then Christians will be targeted, because Kachin state is a Christian state. We've already seen a huge amount of discrimination against Christians in northwest state of Chin state in Burma. So we do see that this is a very cynical use of religion and a manipulation of fear and hate to control the country. So one of the most notorious bloggers that puts out provocative and hate speech against Muslims is actually a senior staff of President Thein Sein's office. So and we've seen the racist statements becoming more and more obvious
and institutionalized.
It's very much institutionalized.
Rather than just being from a certain community, is very much part of the nation or the state's effort. Seems like
there is a huge involvement by the state and the ruling party in encouraging a very extreme form of Buddhism, which now makes this violent Buddhist extremism. It doesn't even look like Buddhism anymore.
But is it even justified through the religion of Buddhism, according to their interpretation of the religion?
I think most people are really in shock at how violent these extremists have been and how hateful they've been, because this goes against the public image of Buddhism. But having said that, we've also seen that these Buddhist extremists are able to travel around the country and organize rallies without any form of restriction. However, if you were to organize a peace rally for press freedom, for press freedom, or a peace rally for Kachin State, against the war in Kachin State, or speaking out for civil liberties and human rights, the authorities will jump on you quite quickly. So we see that there is clear evidence of involvement and support of the state and the ruling party. Partly, it is a way of winning votes away from Aung San Suu Kyi's party, the Nationalist Democracy. It's a way of controlling and redirecting decades of resentment from military rule into another target. And it's also a way of protecting the Chinese immigrant community, because there's been quite a significant wave of immigration and investment coming from mainland China, and it's been easier to redirect that anger and resentment against the Muslim community, and especially the Rohingya community, who have no political protection and basically are soft targets.
It's interesting to see that even the opposition leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, has been quite silent, and the words that she used to describe her stance on this particular issue has been quite mild. Why is that so?
I think there's a range of factors in play. Firstly, if the NLD were to take a very strong stand on this matter, they would be targeted with violence by the Buddhist extremist movement. There's no two ways about that. The other thing too is that when Aung San Suu Kyi, when the violence was broke out at the end of May 2012, Aung San Suu Kyi actually had a crisis meeting with Muslim leaders and called for compassion and tolerance. But that call was drowned out by other developments. But she did actually make a statement, and she did meet the Muslim leaders. What has happened since then is that the NLD has, the Aung San Suu Kyi's party, the Nationalist Democracy, has moved backward and taken a more moderate position by saying that they will address this issue using international human rights principles. Now that sounds mild to us, but it's still seen as very inflammatory in Burma. In fact, in Rakhine or Arakan state, Aung San Suu Kyi is vilified and hated as a traitor to Buddhism. And President Thein Sein is now a hero defending the country from being overrun by the Taliban, because essentially there's been so much fear put into the public to equate Islam with the Taliban, and now they're equating Islam with ISIS. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to actually have a more. I mean, there is a huge amount of expectation in the international community that Aung San Suu Kyi would come out strong on this extremist violence and hate speech. But I think that there are many reasons why she hasn't. And I think there are many people who are also very disappointed that she hasn't done so. But at this point, we still have to remember that the parliament that Aung San Suu Kyi is trying to work with is made up of the same group of people who have been supporting directly or indirectly violence against them.
And 25% of the parliament are represented by the military.
Yes, 25% of the parliament are represented by the military, and the majority of the parliament are represented by the ruling party, which are ex-military or very close to military.
So what's the way forward? I mean, we see the issue has been becoming more and more serious, to the extent that the whole Rohingya community might be estimated by the mere policy that is being drafted right now or being pushed in the parliament. Is ASEAN going to do anything? Because next year Malaysia is going to be chairman, and Rohingya issues definitely will be one of the key issues that will be pushed by the civil society all over Southeast Asia. Would next year might be a good year for the Rohingyas issue being taken seriously? Do you think so?
Yeah. Next year will be an important year for the Rohingya who are able to survive the next few months. Mm-hmm. Frankly, we are seeing a climate where violence against Rohingya is somehow being justified by the national legislative developments, these anti-Muslim laws, by the hate speech and the kind of public rhetoric, and also by ASEAN and other agencies apparently obeying the Burmese regime's bullying not to use the word Rohingya. All of these are sending a very dangerous message to the extremist movement that the international community and definitely ASEAN is not going to take any strong stand or not going to hold Burma accountable if there is a Rohingya genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ASEAN needs to develop some guts because ASEAN keeps talking about how wonderful this regional grouping is, that there's not been any wars since the formation of ASEAN in 1967. Well, there was a genocide in Cambodia on ASEAN's front doorstep. And now we're facing the danger of a genocide in Rakhine State. So I think if ASEAN really wants to be able to hold its head up, it needs to intervene. It needs to be able to work with the international community and develop some principles on human rights and on the prevention of mass atrocities in Burma.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, with Obama daringly used the word Rohingya during his last visit to Myanmar, do you think with this, more and more international leaders would step in and try to give that international pressure to ASEAN to just, do something about it?
I think there has to be a coordinated and international response on Burma, and that might even mean being prepared to suspend economic cooperation, to suspend security cooperation until the situation is resolved. Because as far as Naypyidaw is concerned, the concern about Rohingya has been only mainly lip service. Mm-hmm. So I think the whole country, especially Naypyidaw, needs to be given a very strong message, and the international community needs to be firm on this.
Do you think
we also need to support people? They are Buddhist activists, they are interfaith activists on the ground in the country, trying to campaign against hate speech, who've been working very hard to build peace and tolerance between communities. And these people are being overwhelmed by the hate speech and the official endorsement and protection of the extremist movement. So we need to actually support these people, especially the women and the young people who have been taking a stand against hate. So I think there's still very much hope for Burma and still very much hope for the Rohingya. But what ASEAN does is critical, because when I've been talking to different diplomatic missions, diplomats, to UN agencies and officials, and basically they keep looking at what is ASEAN doing, what lead is ASEAN taking. Everybody is trying to synchronize or base their response on where ASEAN stands on the issue. Mm-hmm. And ASEAN has no stand at this moment. It doesn't have a clear stand. They're just making a lot of different statements. ASEAN as a body is not addressing the issue. It is individual ASEAN countries like Malaysia and Indonesia who have stood up on this situation. That is not good enough.
So a lot of things that needs to be fixed within ASEAN. But on the level of United Nations, Ban Ki-moon has been quite loud on this issue. He made quite a statement on this Rohingya matter, but has United Nations be able? Do you think United Nations would be able to solve this matter?
Well, the problem is that member states of the UN have not been totally supportive, and some of them have been actually been very mild on the issue because they assume that all Burma needs is more time. And my point is that we've given Burma enough time to bring the Rohingya into a pre-genocidal brink of. Basically, we've given Naypyidaw enough time to bring the Rohingya to the brink of genocide. We've given the Naypyidaw enough time to kill more Kachin people and cause more human rights devastation in Kachin state and northern Shan state. We've given the Burmese military more time to grab land from the local people, including people from the not just minority but also majority communities. So I think I don't think we should give that any more time. We need to actually read Burma the Riot Act, and that depends on the political will of the member states of the United Nations and the member states of ASEAN.
With that, thank you very much.
You're welcome.